Good morning. I am Steve Weber, the host of the American Gumption Morning Show, and coming to you live on September 7th, 2020. And today's Labor Day in the USA. So, and I know our friends in Canada also celebrate this day as Labor Day holiday. So today's a day, 3-day weekend, but I'm going to go ahead and broadcast live today because our guest coming up has been, we've been trying to do this interview for a couple of weeks, but he's in a place where he believes he'll be able to connect, and his internet connection, he lives on an island in British Columbia, and so that's not a great place to connect from, but he's going to be in a spot where we're going to make this interview happen today. At least that's the plan. And whether that happens or not, I'm going to go ahead and share the story of Lolita either on my own or with the help of Errol. So we'll just see how it unfolds. We expect him to be here. All righty. And so today's Labor Day, kind of the official or unofficial end of summer. Summer actually technically goes for another couple of weeks. But this is kind of always the back to school time. At least when I was a kid, it was. Now schools start in August typically. And now, I don't know, schools are doing their own thing these days with COVID and homeschooling. So everything's kind of changing. Everything's up in the air. But anyway, it's a great time of the year just because the temperatures start to cool off a little bit. The heat that had occupied July and August, the mornings are a little bit cooler, kind of like magic right around this time of year. It just feels nicer. You wake up and you feel more refreshed, and the days get warm in the afternoon, and then the evenings are start to cool down again. So good, nice time of year, September. This is the 3-day weekend. Most of you are probably off today, and hopefully you're tuning in here to the American Gumption Morning Show to watch me live on Labor Day. All righty. So my monologue today is going to be on freedom. That's really a Memorial Day and a 4th of July, but I'm going to tie it in with Labor Day this year. And I have a movie life lesson, and it's life lesson number 8. Jenny returns home to Greenbow. And so I'm going to tie all these together with freedom and with our idea of freeing Lolita, which is what our guest Errol Povah will be talking about. And so that's coming up in just a little bit here. So just want to tease what's happening later in the week. Tuesday, tomorrow, Dr. Betty Uribe, Dr. Betty Uribe, and she is the author of a book called Values. And I had a chance to talk with Betty on Saturday at late afternoon, and she's got a fascinating story. She came from Colombia as a young girl and has made quite a career and a life for herself. She is truly an individual, a person who is ordinary and extraordinary at the same time. And that same theme continues on Thursday when we have Sue Phillips, who came from South Africa to the United States. She was a young adult when she came here, had just finished her schooling and went to become a Broadway star, but it didn't quite work out that way, but it did work out in a special way. And she has become a fragrance expert. So she's going to be with us on Thursday. So that's what's coming up later in the week. We'll fill in Wednesday and Friday with guests. At least that's the plan. So, all righty. So let's see. Let's jump right into our movie life lesson for the day. And let's see here. We do this. Here we go. Learning to operate after taking a couple days off. And so this is life lesson number 8 from the movie Jenny Returns Home to Greenbow.
Things can change in an instant. Hi, I'm Steve Weber, and we're counting down to number 1 of the best scenes from the movie Forrest Gump to celebrate this year being the 25th anniversary. Here is today's scene. Here is scene number 8 of the best scenes and life lessons from the movie. Suddenly, she was there. Jenny just walked up to Forrest's house while he was out mowing the lawn. Things can change for the better in an instant. then she was there. The music during this scene is sad, lonely. When Forrest says she was there, his voice picks up and feels more alive. There is, in that moment, a sense of optimism, hope.
Love Forrest.
Love Jimmy. Jenny came back and stayed with me. As long as we maintain optimism and hope, things can change in an instant. It takes gumption to keep your chin up when things aren't going your way. It takes gumption to maintain optimism so that you are ready to change in an instant. Do you want to be more Gump-like? Keep your chin up. Stay positive. Believe that things can change in an instant. Let's learn to live our lives with gumption.
All righty. Yeah. So there is our scene number 8 of the movie Life Lessons. That was created last year in honor of the 25th anniversary of the movie Forrest Gump. I did a countdown from 94 all the way to the number 1 scene. And last July 6th was the 25th anniversary. So that probably played right at the end of June as number 8. But yeah, if you're a romantic, and even if you're not a romantic, how can you not love that scene when Jenny comes home? And the reason why I selected that scene this morning is that, Jenny chose, to return to her roots. And right afterwards, what the dialogue that follows was that Jenny slept and slept and slept like she hadn't slept in years. And she had been on that, roaming around the country and, taking drugs and living a lifestyle that probably wore her out. And so she got home and she slept and she rested and she rejuvenated herself. And that's really what holidays are all about, is a rejuvenation. And it's also what freedom is all about. We have the freedom in the United States to live wherever we want. Jenny was out in California but she was raised in Alabama, and then she returned home to Alabama, and then she ended up going off and living in Savannah. So she had the freedom to choose and move and go different places. And today being Labor Day, I think it's important that we remember what is really great about this country, and that is that freedom. And so we have the freedom to choose where we want to live. We have the freedom to choose where we work. Of course, we all need to support ourselves and do something to provide for ourselves and for our families. And maybe it doesn't feel like we have freedom when we're in certain jobs, but we do have that freedom, and we can change jobs. If we don't like where we're at, we can go do something else, and we could start a business. And so that's really one of the things that I think is great about the United States is the fact that we have freedom not only where we live, but where we work. And, what type of job we have the freedom to start our own business. And so, we enjoy that freedom because of what happened. And now this is a time of unrest in the country, and people are hooting and hollering. And obviously there's been people have legitimate grievances that they're expressing themselves and wanting to have their voices heard. And so that's fine. They have the freedom to do that. And we do have freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom to, state what we have. We don't have the freedom to, burn places down and destroy our country, but we do have the freedom to express ourselves. And so anyway, on this Labor Day, I wanted to just take a minute out and remind everybody that, hey, this is a good place to live. I like it. That's why I started American Gumption, is because I love this country, and I think it's a great place. I think that the foundation that we were built on is solid, and it will continue if we the people continue to stand up for what our founders, the principles that they established the country on, and for what we believe in. And so we're in this moment of unrest and uncertainty in our country. The COVID thing has changed everything. People feel like they don't have as much freedom. We've been stuck in our houses, and we know what's going to happen. Who knows? It's gonna all resolve itself in time, and we'll be able to get back to some kind of a new normal, hopefully within the next year. My sense is that suddenly something's going to change, where whether it's a vaccine or whether it's some other kind of event happens, that suddenly the feeling and the need to be locked down is no longer prevalent, and we're going to go back to, and we'll create a new normal and get that going. So anyway, it's just a great message on that day, on this day, Labor Day here, September 7th, the very last day it could possibly be Labor Day. So Labor Day is always the first Monday of September, and so today is the last day of the month, or the last day that it could be Labor Day. So that's kind of a special thing starting today. So alrighty, so that's kind of all I really wanted to say about that. I do have I'm going to tease. I see our guest is arriving in the green room, and getting ready to go. He'll be ready in just a minute or two, I'm sure. And but in the meantime, I'm going to just I want to, before I bring Errol on live, I'll just say that him and I met back in March of this year. We did not know each other. I went out to do a project with the salmon of the Pacific Northwest, and the 4 dams on the lower Snake River. And a friend, a client of mine, has been involved in a project creating a message that will talk and share, what that story of the salmon is, and how the Snake River Dam has been preventing salmon from flowing. And so anyway, I ended up going out to do some work with him. And but at the same time, simultaneous, there was a march for the dams. And so I did some little broadcasts, and that was really the beginning of the American Gumption project, but it was kind of like a little teaser part. And so I went and lived in the RV for a couple of weeks and traveled around Washington and Oregon. But I met up with a group of people who were marching from Portland up to Ice River Dam, which is the lowest of the 4 dams on the Snake River, about 240 miles. And so they were walking that distance. It was going to take, I believe, 4 weeks or 3 weeks. And I ended up joining them after week 1, and I was going to participate. Well, what happened was I was only with them about 5 days when COVID hit and changed everything. And a lot of the people were international, who were the people who are marching, and people from France were the biggest single group. And so suddenly it became like time to scramble and get back to get out of the country before borders were being shut down. And of course it was all happening, and this was late March. So anyway, that was when I met Errol Povah, who I'm going to bring on, and so he was part of that. Now Errol is not. Errol is Canadian, living in British Columbia, and he just, from what I understood, learned about the march just a few days before that happened, and just decided he got in his car and drove down and joined it. He was only a couple hundred miles away from where they were, and became a very integral part of that core group of people who are marching and carrying on. So anyway, that's how we met. And now I was from the salmon side of it, getting rid of these dams in the Pacific Northwest is going to save the salmon, but he was from the orca side of it, and the orcas primarily eat the Chinook salmon, and so they are the endangered species, and now the orcas are the endangered species. So without further ado, let's go ahead and invite Errol onto the program. Errol, are you with us?
I'm with you, Steve.
Excellent.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. You're sounding loud and clear. We've had a couple of false starts trying to get this interview to happen. And so anyway, I'm really grateful you're here with us this morning.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for having just a few episodes. And I'm thoroughly impressed. You cover a wide range of topics, interesting topics that are hopefully helpful to people everywhere.
Yeah. So I want to let me just do a quick introduction. Here's how it's going to work. When I invite a guest on, I do a brief introduction of who they are, and then I play a first-time welcoming song if they are the first-time guest. If we invite you back, you'll never hear this song. So anyway, a little bit about Errol. He's been an activist for most of his adult life. He got involved with tobacco issues early on and ran a group that talked about the dangers. And really that was at the time when, we used to smoke on airplanes and we used to smoke in every kind of, restaurants and everywhere, and then little by little, there were rules that that made it, and so now smokers became pariahs and now they're banished to the outside street corners. But anyway, that was how you got your start in activism. And then you switched over to the sea life and specifically the orcas. And I know there's a few different aquariums around the world that aren't happy when Errol Povah shows up because he's usually carrying some kind of a sign and talking about the injustice to the creatures that are in essentially captivity with it. And again, the other thing that you did as your career, you were a ferry boat captain, if I understand that correctly. So for many years, you've lived in the Pacific Northwest and the islands of Vancouver and British Columbia area, and you operated the ferry and helped people commute back and forth from the islands. Is that correct?
Well, I certainly wasn't the operator per se. I did a number of different jobs over my 30-year career at the ferries. When I retired, I was a deckhand / second officer, navigating officer. So yeah, I have a little bit of it.
Well, you're the closest I know to a ferry captain, so we're just I'm going to pretend that that's what you are. Anyway, let's go ahead and play the welcoming song. You're only going to get this one time on, so enjoy it while we have it. Here we go.
Sounds good, Steve.
All right. Have you ever been welcomed on to a show where they had a marching band play for you?
Never. And I truly appreciate it. And perhaps we could call this episode American Gumption with a little bit of Canadian Gumption added for good mix.
Right before I launched American Gumption, I had like this second thought and I went, do I need to call this Global Gumption? Because we really are a global community. But I do have that website locked down. And so, you're part of the Global Gumption that goes on.
Awesome.
Good. So so you've been an activist for a long time, and for the last 20 or so years, you've been involved with Sea Shepherd Conservation Society. Just tell us a little bit about the things you've been doing the last 20, 30 years.
Okay. I joined Sea Shepherd specifically when the macaw tribe of Northwest Washington decided to go hunting gray whales. Until that point, gray whales had been on the endangered species list. They were taken off that list somewhere around 1995 or so, I believe. And a few individuals on the reservation decided they were going to go hunting gray whale. Rumors that Japan, one of the biggest illegal pirate whaling nations in the world, had offered the macaw $1 million to kill a whale. Again, I personally don't know if that is fact or not, but in any case, it was a relatively small group on the reservation that wanted to do this. A number of elders stood up and expressed their opposition to the hunt. In particular, a woman named Alberta Thompson. A number of us befriended her, and for years after that one single hunt, I would drive down to Washington State and visit her. She was an incredible woman. The price she paid for standing up against the hunt, she was fired from her job, her tires were slashed, and her dog was killed. So many of the other elders were on. They saw what happened to her. They backed down and kept their mouths shut. So, long story short, the macaw did kill a whale, a juvenile whale. That it would have been in 90, I believe it was 98 or 99. There was media from all over the world in Nia Bay. The British Broadcasting Corporation was there, and it was just such a bizarre sight. This small, typical American village was just inundated with big crews from all over the world. And as long as the cameras were rolling, you know, they dragged the gray whale up onto the beach, and they cut it up and handed little pieces out to the kids and everybody. It was a big family affair, and like I say, as long as the cameras were rolling, they pretended they were eating it and enjoying it. But after the media left, the remains of the whale got towed back into the sea, and I believe the macaw did subsequent whales. One was illegal, one was not under a permit, and I believe a couple of the crew actually did some jail time in that incident. The other one was under a permit, but again, they dropped it. But just within the last year or so, they've been in federal court in the U.S. Applying for through NOAA, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and NIMS, the National Marine Fisheries Service, for permits to hunt whales again. I don't know exactly what stage that particular court case is at right now, but
so you, Earl, you saw this injustice back in the 90s, and you were operating on the ferry, so you were out there, you know, seeing these, you were living in the same area that this was going on, and you basically said, "Hey, enough is enough. It doesn't seem right," and that's so you stood up and you took a stand. Is that what happened?
Exactly, yeah. At that time, I had been thinking about joining Sea Shepherd for quite a while, and that was the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back. I just said, "Yeah, I got to do this." So I got involved, and I've been on a few pretty big campaigns since then. I went to Antarctica again to oppose the Japanese whaling fleet. Which has now ended that particular practice. It's my understanding they still hunt whales within their 200. But it's also my understanding that in Japan, elderly people still eat the whale meat, but the younger generations are just rejecting it entirely, and that's a good thing. I also went to the Faroe Islands. again, to try and interfere with and shut down the killing of about 1,000 pilot whales every year. It's just a bloodfest. It's a horrific event to witness. Somewhat similar to the dolphin hunts in Taiji, Japan. In both cases, the animals are just herded into a bay, and in the Faroes, virtually all of the whales are slaughtered and eaten, even though there's extremely high mercury content in them. In Japan, it's the only real difference is with the dolphins. They're trapped, they're netted off, pushed into a bay, and divers are the youngest, most physically fit, healthiest ones, and they're lifted out of the water and transported to aquariums all over the world. And most of the rest are slaughtered.
Hey, Errol, I was thinking about this, and I don't know whether we talked about it or not, but Barnum and Bailey came out with their circus in the late 1800s, and they had elephants and tigers, and they paraded them all through, and they took them on trains and sent them all over across the continental U.S. and went from town to town. And that practice came to an end as, it became, not a sustainable way. And initially people looked at it and went, oh, this is great. I get to see elephants, I get to see lions and tigers. But then after a while, you become aware that, wait, this isn't humane. This isn't the right thing to do. These animals become they don't become themselves. They're not living, they're in cages, and they just, go around in circles and do these kind of, behaviors that are, neurotic, I guess.
Absolutely.
Is what we call them. And so over time, we went from having circuses to not having circuses, and even zoos have begun to change their whole, I remember going to the Philadelphia Zoo as a child, and, seeing the lion, and it was just like a concrete, a couple of walls and, a back and a little tiny bit of water in the front of it and a big concrete area and, like a rock. And that was it. It wasn't and now of course they have these different environments where the large cats are in their own kind of area mixed with other large cats. And it's a little bit better, but of course it's still a cage, but the whole zoo thing has begun to change. The aquarium is probably the last of the captivity of animals or creatures, and so they've been the slowest to respond to the realization that keeping large or even small creatures that don't belong in cages caged up is inhumane. Is that fair assessment?
Absolutely, yeah, and I part of why that situation exists, I believe, is simply because aquariums have the ability to dress it up and make it look so wonderful and so attractive to kids. And hey mom, hey dad, let's go to the aquarium. But as you said, ultimately it's animal abuse. To suggest that it's anything other than that is a lie. And all of these facilities, whether it's aquarium, zoos, whatever, they will tell us that they love the animals. But I would suggest that they love the money much more than the animals. If the animals weren't bringing in the money, they'd be tossed out like garbage.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and let's go ahead and get into the Lolita story, because right after I started the American Gumption Morning Show at the beginning of August, I received a message from you, and you introduced me to the story, Lolita. I didn't know anything about it. at that time, and so you educated me. And then since then, I've done some more research. We've had a couple of conversations that were not recorded, but were education for both of us. So we both have a pretty good idea of the story at this point. I want to share my screen. Let's see. How do I? Give me just a second here to remember how to do this. There we go. So this is back on August 8th in 1970 in a place called Penn Cove. And we have basically a bunch of orcas being captured in there. Why don't you tell us just a little bit about what happened that day?
Okay. Yeah, like you said, Steve, it was August 8th of 1970, we marked the occasion of the 50th anniversary of Lolita's capture. We marked it by doing a huge protest at the BC legislature here in Victoria. Just trying to draw attention. As you said, you knew nothing about Lolita, and you're not alone. Sadly, much to the delight of the aquarium owners, in this case, the Miami Seaquarium and Arthur Hertz specifically, much to the delight of those type of people, very few Lolita. And of course the other orcas, all of the other orcas in captivity at SeaWorlds and Marineland here in Canada and aquariums in Europe that are all part of that big business. Lolita was one of about 90 orcas that were captured on August 8th of 1970. She was one of 7 who were captured. To all of the world. Of those 7, she's the only one still surviving. It's really quite unusual for an orca to survive this long in captivity. Their lifespan is much less in captivity as compared to the wild. 5 other orcas were not among those 7. 5 separate ones died in this process. You can see from the images there, it's pretty horrific. The whales were panicking. There were bombs being dropped into the water above them, speedboats on the water. It was just complete chaos for them. They had no idea what was going on. And the mums were separated from the babies, and that prompted even more stress on them. I
want to acknowledge that Wally Funk was the photographer for all of those, and I ended up getting those images off of. I'm going to put up this. Let me add this to our ticker to the bottom. The SaveLolita.org website, and so I ended up. You and I didn't specifically talk about that. I'm switching the bottom graphic to say SaveLolita.org, and so those pictures that I just shared and showed you came from that website, and specifically Wally Funk is the credited photographer for all of those pictures. So we want to acknowledge him. And one thing that he said, I'm going to show one more slide that I didn't show yet. It says this is the quote from the photographer. They were entrapped in a small area. They were flailing in the air. You could hear high-pitched squeal, and they were communicating with many, many more that were outside the net in Penn Cove. So this whole pod essentially got herded into a cove, netted off. A lot of people that were involved in this. It wasn't just like 1 or 2 people. I mean, there was like a lot of boats, and there was organizers who made it all happen, but there was an airplane, and they were dropping like these explosive devices to kind of frighten them and scare them into the area. And then once they went into this cove, they got netted off, and they essentially were trapped. The small ones were separated out, and the big ones were set to let go, but the big ones didn't want to leave because the small ones were still there. And so there was all this squealing and hollering, and it was not a very nice practice. And for about a 10-year period, that was kind of a normal thing that went on, where it was okay to just round up orcas. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes. As it turns out, 1970 was roughly the midpoint point of that. Even those whales that were let go on August 8th of 1970, it's quite possible they were captured in a subsequent hunt a year or more later, until the practice finally ended in about 1975. I should also mention too that so many of the individuals involved in that hunt have they've literally been brought to tears. Documentaries, etc. Blackfish. Again, a number of those individuals just they were young. Generally speaking, they were young kids at the time, in their late teens, early 20s. They thought this was a big fun adventure to go and catch an orca, but they severely regret it. If they had to do it all over again, they would have had nothing to do with it. But again, young and foolish, perhaps, and who knows how much they were paid to participate in that. But
well, they obviously got paid a few bucks, and at the time it seemed like the right thing to do. And so rather than like we can forgive ourselves, we can forgive others for doing things, but you need to make amends, and you need to do the right thing going forward. And that's really what this effort to save Lolita is all about. It's just doing the right thing. Maybe back in the 1960s and 70s, we thought, okay, this is acceptable. We take orcas and we capture them and we put them in the seaquariums. But we now know 50 years later that this is not the right thing to do. I want to show another graphic. And this is the tank that Lolita lives in. And you can see it's about 80 feet wide at the widest part of the oval. But there's this work island, which is where Lolita jumps up to and rests and, does her performing act from. And the other people who come out and, her trainers or her handlers come out and she interacts and works with them. But for the most part, all she does is she lays in that part where she is right now. It's about 20 feet deep. It's less deep at the side. It's only about 35 feet wide. It's severely undersized for what the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Services by the Department of Agriculture recommends that you have for an orca, for a fish this size. And so anyway, all she does is about 3 shows a day, and the rest of the time she just sort of lays idly in there doing kind of quirky things, which is neurotic behaviors of any captured, entrapped animal or species. Yeah.
I often say she's languishing. She's surviving. She's not thriving. It's just tragic. And I think you've seen I think I sent you the link to a documentary called Lolita, A Slave to Entertainment. And I highly recommend it gets into the some of the really nasty parts. Well, the whole industry is nasty, but specifically in this case, for example, they show the back of the building, and then technically the Seaquarium doesn't want people going anywhere near that and seeing it, but they do a very good job of exposing it. And there's literally dozens and dozens of Seaquarium, the stadium. It's dilapidated. It's about to fall down, but the owners won't invest money in it because, from their perspective, that's a waste. It's a waste of money. I guess in their minds, they're thinking, well, Lolita is going to die within a year or two or whatever. So why would we invest money in this place, which is quite exclusively been Lolita's home for decades? The place is falling apart. There's huge support steel beams that are cracked. Water leaks through into electrical panels, and I think a lot of people are quite seriously concerned that the stadium might collapse before Lolita dies. And that would certainly finish her off. That would be the end of her. But yeah, this the Seaquarium paid $20,000 for her.
Mm-hmm.
She's been offered, that owner, Arthur Hertz, has been offered millions of dollars to release her, and he's obviously made. I haven't done the math, but I'm guessing they've made tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars off of Lolita, and they still refuse, even though she's one of the best candidates for release, at least into a sanctuary for a short period of time, and then perhaps into the wild.
That's a great transition.
Where her mother is still alive at the age of 83.
Yeah. So one of the things that people say is, gee, you can't take an orca that's been in captivity for 50 years and possibly expect her to survive by releasing her out there. Well, there's actually a plan. And again, this is from the SaveLolita.org website, but they credit Ken Balcom of the Center for Whale Research and Howard Garrett of the Orca Network for coming up with this plan of how Lolita could survive. And my understanding is she would be placed into a cove in the Pacific Northwest, in the same area that you're living in the kind of the Puget Sound area, the San Juan Island area, and basically they would have a area which is actually it's actually the bay, it's sort of the sound, and she would be netted off into an area that is like hundreds of times bigger than what she's currently living in, and they would teach her how to follow the boat and begin to forage and eat for herself, but then follow this boat around. And then they would actually take her out into the sound and follow the boat and bring her back to safety of the area that she is. And she would end up essentially having her choice on whether she wants to stay in the protection of the cove or whether she wants to go out into the wild and be reunited with her family. And her family, the southern resident orcas, they emit a certain sound, and apparently Lolita has been emitting that sound every day for the last 50 years, trying to reach out to her family. So go ahead and pick up the story from there.
Yeah, I've seen the plan. It's very detailed on the Orca Network .org website. Yeah, they cover absolutely every little detail from the beginning of the operation all the way through the flight, and obviously to the cove where she would be released, which coincidentally is very close to the cove in which she was captured, Penn Cove. Yeah, as I said before, she's an ideal candidate for release. The simple fact that her pod is still around, and her mother is still alive at the age of 83. Or a better case for release. And yet Arthur Hertz just hangs on to Lolita, and I have no idea how one individual can have that level of control. Some very high-level politicians have been involved in the fight to have Lolita released. The former governor of Washington, and many others, and yet Arthur Hertz just seems to have this veto power, which yeah, and there has been some concern expressed. I mean, I certainly heard it from, I don't recall if it was Arthur Hertz or one of the veterinarians at the Miami Seaquarium, and I've heard it from individuals on our side of the issue as well. The concern about pathogens. I'm not a doctor. I'm not a biologist. I quite frankly, I don't know a lot about pathogens, but the concern has been expressed that if she were released least that she could pass on to the rest of the southern, well, at least the rest of her pod, perhaps all 3 pods in the southern that make up the southern resident orcas, or that they may have a pathogen that they would pass along to her. Again, I'm not a biologist, but I think we have the technology to run tests and find out if these pathogens in fact exist, or is it just a boogeyman kind of argument? Oh no, we can't. Miami Seaquarium is playing the role of good corporate citizen, expressing all of this concern in quotation marks for Lolita and the entire southern resident group. But
hey Errol, if we go back to the idea that the salmon are the primary food of orcas, and one of the reasons that the orcas are not thriving partly was because they had a whole bunch of their young taken away from them 50 years ago, but the Chinook salmon are declining. And so we met back again in March when we were the March for the Dams, the effort to remove the 4 lower Snake River dams. And I think there's kind of a connection between there's like the big dam lobby says, no, you can't take care of these, you can't remove these dams. This is, we need the power, and there's absolutely, you can't take them away. I think there's a big fear that if they remove these dams and these fish come back in big numbers and return, then this is going to, kill the dam industry, all over the place. And we're going to have to find different sources of power. And we're going to learn that, dams are not the correct thing. And then if these, what if we take Lolita and we return her to the wild, and she ends up thriving, and she ends up having offspring of herself, and she goes and lives her mother is like 40 years older than her at this point, or 30 years older than her. What if Lolita ends up, giving birth and helping to bring back the strength of the southern? It's going to be the end of all orcas in captivity. So there's absolutely real fear that, you do this and it could end up being a domino effect and going, wait a minute, we can't have these creatures in little tanks. Obviously they're big tanks on a human perspective, but they're little tiny tanks compared to what they need to live and thrive in. So anyway. Yeah.
Putting it into perspective, it's like a bathtub would be to us. But you're absolutely right. There's a huge, and that's a very good analogy. The dams and the aquariums. If Lolita was released successfully, that's the last nail in the coffin of the entire captivity industry. And same with the dams. And another similarity is, as I mentioned before, I think the best word to describe the Miami Seaquarium in its current condition is dilapidated. It's obsolete. It's falling apart, literally falling apart at the seams, and that applies to the dams as well. The money that is spent maintaining those dams, it's crazy. It outweighs any financial benefit that and any money that the dams have by the maintenance costs, and yet the government they just cling on to them like it would be the end of the world if they were gone. Well, no, it's quite the opposite. It would open up the rivers. They would return to the wild, which brings to mind another awesome documentary called Artificial. In this case, the FIC part of the word artificial is actually spelled FISH. It's incredible it's about man's efforts to recreate or improve on nature. And as they point out in this film, that will never happen. despite our best efforts, we only make it worse. And the dams have got to go, fish farms have got to go, hatcheries have got to go. They're all very destructive and ultimately wiping out all of these keystone species like the sun.
Well, Earl,
Yeah.
thank you for for bringing this to my attention. And I, back in March, I was strictly a salmon guy. I didn't see the downstream, orca food chain portion of it, but yourself and the organizers of the March for the Dam, they educated me. They helped me to understand that the entire ecosystem was perfectly made to balance each other out. And then, of course, we come along and we think we're improving on it. And in some ways we improve on things. And we obviously, as a species, need to survive. So we need to do certain things. But when is certain things going too far? And I think that's, again, the circus stopped taking elephants and tigers and lions around in boxcars from city to city to city, because it just became, unsustainable. It wasn't the right thing to do. And wouldn't it be great if we could do that same thing with with our rivers and with our oceans, and allow, and the other thing they say is it's for education. Well, it's entertainment is really all it's good for. There's a lot more education that can come from like a show like this, or from documentaries that talk about it, because you have people that can sort of frame it and put them in their atmosphere, in their environment, and show them out there living, and how the orcas are really one of the most social creatures that there are. Tell us just a little tiny bit about the society of these pods, and specifically the southern resident orcas, which you're so familiar with.
Okay. Again, I'm not a biologist, etc. But yeah, the southern residents really are quite unique. They're as with all orcas, they're incredible. They when they're going after prey, they will work together. They communicate with each other. They're almost with military precision, although I shouldn't use that analogy. But they're amazing animals, and
very playful,
again,
jumping around, and the people who have followed them, have shown how they have that military precision when they're hunting, but then they are very social and playful with each other, and that's why I think they're such a beloved species, is because they're so much fun to watch. You can see them from shore.
Absolutely, and I don't want to come across as sort of trying to shut down too many industries, but the whale watching industry certainly can be problematic. There's good companies out there, and there are not so good ones. They're a certain distance within the orcas when they find them, and the orcas move around, the boats drift, assuming they've turned off their engines, and they ultimately wind up coming a little bit closer to we just as a society, we just need to leave them alone, let them do their thing. I don't know if you heard the news, but J35, I won't begin to pronounce her, but J35, everyone I'm sure will recall a couple of years ago now, the mother orca who pushed her dead calf around for 17 days,
yep,
which is unprecedented. And despite my decades of involvement in this issue, I just saw that as like, wow, if that's not Mother Nature, an incredible animal, trying stop messing our lives up with whether it's pollution, vessel traffic, starvation from the lack of fish, etc. If we didn't get the message after that, maybe we never will. I don't know, and that would be tragic. But
maybe we can, if enough of us band together and keep pushing, maybe the Miami Seaquarium will do the right thing, return Lolita to her environment, and Lolita could end up being the aunt to this new calf of J35. So wouldn't that be a story that would be great? Hey, Earl, we're at the top of the hour, so we're going to have to wrap this up. You got 1 minute or 30 seconds to say any last things that people should, where should people, if they want to help, where should they reach out to? The Sea Shepherd Conservation Society?
SeaShepherd.org. I actually wrote down a few websites here. Actually, if I may, I hope this will work. Wait a minute, let's get it lined up here. This is just one of the.
Whoops! Hold on a second. Let me. There you go. Look at that. Visit.
There you go. There's a few of the websites that people can visit.
Orca
information about this specifically.
.org. U.S.
The
Navy.
U.S. Navy. That's a whole other story. We don't have time for that right now, but the new U.S. Navy wants to do a bunch of stuff, and in their own application to NOAA. They've said, we don't anticipate killing any southern resident orcas. Well, sorry, but that's not good enough. I want a virtual guarantee that no orcas will be killed or even harmed. They're suggesting that they might cause some temporary deafness. And it'll affect their breeding and their navigation. Well,
that's not.
I'm sure they can go far enough offshore that there will be virtually zero impact on the orcas. But
well, great. Well, hey, Earl, thanks again for joining us. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up to this Labor Day show. I do appreciate your coming today, and I appreciate that that we became friends, that you are supporting the orca, and that you turned me on to this story because I just didn't know anything about it, and I'm happy to share it here on the American Gumption Morning Show. And I hope that we can bring you back and we can have an update on Lolita's story, soon. Wouldn't that be a great story?
Absolutely.
All right.
Yes. Again, I would just say, encourage your viewers to watch Lolita, A Slave to Entertainment. It's very powerful and eye-opening, and hopefully we'll get many more people involved in the fight.
Great. All righty. Well, thank you. Have a great rest of your Labor Day. Thanks for coming in and getting up early on a Monday holiday to join us here on the American Gumption Morning Show. We'll see you again.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Okay. Great. All righty. Well, that's Earl, and really happy that he joined us this morning. We tried a couple times to make this story happy, so I'm really grateful that it happened this morning. And if you just go to YouTube and you Google Lolita, you will find dozens of videos that tell the story of Lolita, and the fact that it's 50 years when she was captured just last month. I mean, it just seems like the time is ripe for us to all do the right thing. So we make mistakes in our past and we correct them. And that's what makes this a great country. We right our wrongs. And so we'll continue to do that. Everybody have a great rest of your Labor Day. I appreciate, I want to say thank you again to SaveLolita.org, where I ended up getting a lot of the information to educate myself. And again, Errol Povah for joining us this morning and for first turning me on to the story a month ago, and then helping me get up to speed with it, and then finding out that this is all connected. We're all connected, everybody. We're all connected. So Errol Povah, an ordinary individual doing extraordinary work with his life. All righty. So that's it for today. Tomorrow we have Dr. Betty Uribe. the author of Values, and we'll get into that with her. And then on Thursday, Sue Phillips, and we'll do something on Wednesday and Friday. So, all right, everybody, have a great rest of your Labor Day weekend. We'll see you again tomorrow morning.